The second half of the Major Arcana is just as symbolic as the first. Along with representing various mindsets and personalities, the tarot cards that make up the Major Arcana represent a journey from beginning to end. We're halfway through the journey as it is, so let's keep going and pick up where we left off. Our starting card today is card number 11, Justice. This one's pretty much what it says on the tin. It represents one's morality and the discipline and will required to uphold that morality. Justice usually depicts a person, usually a woman, holding a sword in one hand and a pair of scales in the other. This is the person you usually see as a statue outside of your local city courthouse, although these statues usually show Lady Justice being blindfolded, because of the saying, justice is blind. Some versions of the card, such as the version used in Persona 3 and 4, depict only the sword with the scales hanging from the handle. The character in the game gives off a nice superhero vibe from this one. She's happy, she's energetic, she's got her weapon, she's got a pair of scales as her call sign, she's dressed like the warrior she is, and she looks like she's ready to beat down some bad guys. This design is pretty loosely based on the card, so we're throwing this into the pile of design based on the card but varied enough to be its own thing. Not much else to say other than she's actually pretty cute. I'd like to see a superhero comic about this character. Number 12 is the Hanged Man, which represents taking responsibility for any wrongdoings you've done and accepting the consequences for your actions. So it's actually rather appropriate this card is just after Justice. It depicts a person being hung upside down by one ankle. This is based on the medieval punishment where the offender is hanged upside down so all the blood in their body rushes to their head. Not a pleasant feeling, trust me. The character representing this card is kind of weird. Hey, you got that upside down. Or is that right side up? Whatever. Apparently, he's cursed or something, so he's always hanging upside down in midair. So instead of walking around, he just hangs out. He's obviously dressed as a farmer, complete with chewing on a piece of straw, to mimic the class of medieval commoners who usually receive this punishment for something small, like stealing a cookie from a cookie jar. Okay, I don't know if they had cookie jars back then, but you know what I mean. And before anyone says it, it's not just a joke, it's actually canon in the story of the game. He uses this condition to try to look up girl skirts. As for how the design is, I'd say it's pretty simple, but the whole, just a little detail of hanging upside down in mid-air just seems to add a little perspective. No pun intended. Anyway, card number 13 is perhaps the most misunderstood card of the Major Arcana, Death. Death is usually depicted as a skeleton wearing knight's armor, sometimes riding a horse and waving a black flag. Contrary to popular belief, when the Death card appears, it doesn't necessarily signify the death of a person, but rather the death of an era or the death of a phase of the journey. It's a card representing change. Think of it like Gandalf said in The Lord of the Rings, death is but the next great adventure. As for the character, she seems strictly based on the stereotypical concept of death, being the imagery of the Grim Reaper. But the outfit they use, well, she looks like the kind of goth girl who'd get her clothes and jewelry from Hot Topic while listening to My Chemical Romance. At least she has that menacing attitude to make her look intimidating. All in all, I'd say the creators gave her own outfit, but also a personality that doesn't quite fit the traditional card meaning. Like, okay, it gets the point across that this is a card representing death, but it's purely visual, really. It doesn't have anything to do with the card, it's more its own thing. Like the High Priestess, they took a lot of liberties with the design, but they kept the essential props to get the point across. The scythe, the skulls. Can't imagine the design working too well if she was holding the aforementioned black flag. Card number 14 is Temperance, another pretty straightforward card. Depicted as an angel holding 2 cups and transferring water between them. This card represents control, pacing, and moderation. Imagine the angel is trying to distribute the water evenly between the two cups. The character design in the game is pretty simple, but it gets the point across. Like the magician, it's pretty heavily based on the card itself, just by appearance alone. But they adapted the design and gave it a personality. You can tell she's a gentle spirit trying to bring balance to everything. And I actually feel pretty bad for the face Temperance makes when you pull off a good combo. I mean, it looks like she's about to cry. Number 15 is the Devil, another misunderstood card. The Devil represents temptation and how one responds to it. While in Western lore, the word devil typically refers to Satan, usually the image of the goat-headed Baphomet is used on the card instead. In most tarot readings, if the card is upside down or not, states whether or not the person in question easily gives in to urges and seductions and temptations. It's like, for example, saving money for your apartment's rent versus spending that same money to buy the next hot video game. As for the character, the only real difference I see is that his face is that of a human rather than a goat. He's got everything else, though. The horns, the wings, the pointy ears, the upside-down star on his forehead, typically representing Satanism. And yet, he's a little kid. But that grin on his face, that little smirk, all but confirms that he's up to no good. He's a dastardly little troublemaker, he knows it, and he ain't gonna stop anytime soon. He fits the image almost perfectly. Now we move on to what is probably my absolute favorite character design in the entire game. The Tower. Card number 16. The Tower is usually depicted as a tall building with people falling to their doom from the top after it's struck by lightning, blasting off a big chunk of it. The card represents obstacles and misfortune upon the journey that is the path of life. Now, you might be wondering, how could they turn a building made of stone and rock into a sentient character capable of human levels of intelligence? And how can they implement it into the game? Like this. Look at it. Look how freaking awesome it is. It's like Stone Man from Mega Man 5 had sex with a Megazord from Power Rangers, and this is the baby that popped out. It looks absolutely amazing. And in his wind pose, he radiates lightning and strikes the pose like he's the strongest being alive. And for good reason. This guy is a freaking giant. If you had to fight him physically, he'd fit right in with the bosses from Shadow of the Colossus or God of War. I gotta applaud the makers of this game for this one. They got really creative with the design, and it looks so awesome! Alright, that's enough gushing about that. I've got a video to do. Moving on! The next card is card number 17, the Star, representing hope and determination. Along with the star itself, the card usually depicts a young woman pouring water out of some jugs at the same way that Aquarius of the Western Zodiac does. Nice and simple. The character looks really cute and optimistic here. She's got bright eyes, her mannerisms are charming and adorable. Kinda makes you want to do everything you can to support her in what she does, and make her happy and keep that hope alive. Not much else needs to be said, really. It's really straightforward there. Number 18 is the Moon. The moon represents an air of mystery and uncertainty, like how moonlight illuminates the dark, but only by so much. Along with the moon itself, there's usually two pillars in the background, sometimes a couple of wild animals, but there's almost always a lobster in the picture as well. In some cases, the moon can be seen as a symbol of pessimism. The character? Yeah, I'm not getting any pessimism vibes from her, actually. She seems very lovely, kind and charismatic like Star, but also appearing more mature and composed. I assume she's designed this way to be closer to the idea of a moon goddess, such as Artemis of Greek mythos, rather than the meaning of the tarot card itself. And if it wasn't for the moon marking on her forehead and the crescent moon she's sitting in her wind pose, you probably wouldn't be able to tell she was the moon card. It really doesn't have that much of a connection with the card itself, as far as like visual symbolism and whatever, but I don't really see how they could have implemented that. It's really weird. I think this imagery with Moon being a young woman, sophisticated, matured, and everything like that, but still charming and everything, it has this... It seems like a much more appealing image to me than basing it on the card itself. Next up is card number 19, the Sun. While the moon represents pessimism and mystery, the sun is the opposite, representing honesty and optimism. The card depicts the sun, of course, but it also usually depicts a happy child, sometimes riding on the back of a horse. The sun looks so adorable in this game. It's literally a happy little ball of sunshine. I mean, look at that big smile. Not even in a game of Kirby have I seen such a happy little baby. And that game's almost nothing but smiles and cuteness. This has to be one of the most adorable video game characters I have ever seen, hands down. Just give me a plushie of it. I would cuddle it. We're almost at the end now. The second to last card is number 20, Judgment. It symbolizes the prediction of upcoming events and evaluations of how everything will turn out. In other words, judgment. Like it says on the tin. It depicts an angel, some would say it's none other than the Archangel Gabriel, blowing a trumpet above a crowd of dead humans emerging from their graves to be judged by God. This card may be a reference to the book of Revelations in the Christian Bible, as that book speaks of 7 angels playing 7 trumpets, and each trumpet breaking a seal that summons the apocalypse, or, as it's called in some cultures, the rapture. This is essentially the upcoming end of the journey, when the person in question predicts where the end of the road will lead in relation to their actions. The character appears as an angel with a trumpet in her hand. She appears to be wearing a tube top and a skirt, simple enough, and her expression is one of confidence and knowing. Just look at that body language. She knows how to do her job and to do it well. Not really much else to say. This character sticks pretty close to the design on the card. Although, the hairdo's a nice touch. And finally, the final card in the Major Arcana. Card number 21. The World. The World is depicted as a beautiful goddess, draped only in a sash or a ribbon, but otherwise naked. She's surrounded by images of man, bird, bull, and lion, to signify her connections with all life and knowledge, and her unmatched compassion, intellect, power, and bravery. The world represents the end of the journey of life, where the traveler has not only achieved their goals, but acquired knowledge, wisdom, and experience from the grand adventure along the way that is life. The character in the game is that same goddess, but with a key detail. An extra eye, smack in the middle of the forehead. Like the Fool, the world is pretty much lifted from the card she represents, but with a significant part of her changed to make her seem more fantastical. I assume this third eye is in reference to the imagery present in most of Buddhism, with the concept of being able to access knowledge and wisdom of the universe by opening that third eye. It adds an atmosphere of immeasurable grace and wisdom to the character, making her seem that much more significant and important. And so, we complete the expansive journey through the Major Arcana and the characters of Magical Drops 3. We've met many various characters along the way. Charming and intimidating, good or bad, male or female. All the experiences of this journey helped me open my eyes a little, refreshing what I already knew, and yet still amazing me with what I didn't. I hope you viewers enjoyed the journey as much as I have, and I hope this video was also informative. Who knows? You might make such a journey yourself at some point. Nothing's stopping you from taking that first step. There will be many challenges, whether by other travelers on the path of life, or by the very forces of nature. The journey that is life may not be short, safe, or easy. That doesn't mean it won't get to your destination. I'll see you there when the time comes. This is Silver, telling you to stay silver.